Water Agency regular board meeting on November 7th, 2023. Just a housekeeping announcement for those who are attending virtually. If you could mute your speaker until you're ready to make public comment or participate in the meeting in some way. And for those of us that are in the auditorium or in the boardroom today, please mute your mobile devices. And with that, I will ask Secretary Treasurer McKenna to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ask somebody else? Okay. I'm going to ask Director Gracia then.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. So we will conduct this meeting in roll call order for discussions and questions in the following order: Director Gracia, Director Bloomer, Secretary Treasurer McKenna, Vice President Bowman, and President Ortega. And all votes will be counted via roll call. So with that, we can move to item number 2 on the agenda, which is public comments on items not on the agenda. This would be an opportunity for members of the public to make public comment on a matter related to the business of the water agency, but not necessarily on today's agenda. And we ask that you keep those comments to under 3 minutes. And I will check with Assistant Secretary Baca. Have we received any public comments?
None have been received, but if I could take roll call, please.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Director Gracia,
Present.
Director Bloomer,
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Present.
Vice President Bowman,
Here.
and President Ortega,
Thank you.
all present.
All right. So we have not received public comment via email or otherwise. So we can move to item number 4, which is public comment on items that are listed on the agenda. Again, if there are members of the public who wish to speak about an item that we have on today's agenda, please let us know now. Okay, we can proceed to the next item. Item 5, which is the consent calendar. We have listed on the agenda quite a few items on the consent calendar, and I will start with Director Gracia to see if there's anything on the consent calendar you would like to have pulled and discussed.
Yes, I'd like to pull number F, letter F. Just one question.
Okay, great. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
No.
No? Vice President Bowman?
None.
None? And Director Bloomer?
None.
Okay. All right, so we can start with addressing item, I believe you said F.
F.
5F.
Right.
Request authorization to publish notice of disposition of accumulated money for the purpose of transferring unclaimed monies to the operating fund. And I guess that would be Director Sines?
Just take a shot. Maybe one of them might have the answer.
Okay.
And if not, that's fine. It's just, oh,
Okay,
good.
great.
On, I was curious in reading the budget or the agenda packet on this item, which is F, the unclaimed money and transfer unclaimed monies to the operating fund. Some of them were listed as stale checks. Are you in possession of checks that were not deposited, or can you explain that?
Okay, absolutely. So why they are a stale check is the process that we go through is whenever we have a refund to a customer or anybody else for that matter where we are making payment, it can be returned back to us by the Postal Service. We do our due diligence to attempt to resend, contact the customer to try and get that money back to them or the vendor or whoever it may be. And these are just instances where we have been unable to provide those funds to those people. Therefore, they are stale.
I see. So the money's in the bank. Is that what?
Money is in the bank. We
Okay.
have the money. We have it set aside for if they desire to come and
Right,
claim
okay.
it, because we have gone through an extensive process trying to get those funds to them, whether it be because it's somebody that we currently work with, for example, the city of Palm Springs. We'll have payments that get stale dated because they've never cashed them. They have them, it didn't get returned back to us, but they never cashed it. So we get in contact with them and say, hey, this was a purpose for it. We do our research, we try, and then we reissue the check to try and get them the money back to them whenever possible.
All right.
But sometimes our efforts are unsuccessful.
Thank you. That makes sense. That's it.
Okay. All right, then. Could I get a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented?
I'll move item 5, staff recommendation.
Thank you. And I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Director Gracia, a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is an action item. 6A, request board action on customer appeal, Charles Potter. And I believe that's our Assistant Manager, Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, President Ortega and members of the board. So the agency's resolution number 1224 that was adopted back in December of 2019 addressed new and expanded customer protections regarding water service related matters. Section 5 of this resolution outlined procedures that must be satisfied for a customer to file an appeal. And for the appeal today, all of those requirements have been met. Today, Charles Potter is appealing his September 2023 water bill for the reasons listed below, which are does not agree with the high bill for September 2023, does not use a lot of water, and only 3 elderly people live part-time at that residence. So staff has outlined a summary and procedures that are to follow as part of this appeal. We've highlighted some dates here, important dates. So on September 22nd, the customer did file a dispute of the September bill. It was a September 14th bill. Staff then completed an investigation of that dispute and determined that the bill was correct. Then staff then mailed and emailed the customer the results of that investigation. Then on October 3rd, the customer filed an appeal to the board. We then notified the customer of the appeal date, which was going to be October 17th. However, the customer was out of town and wanted to be here, so therefore we moved it to the date today for the appeal. And staff has also provided the board correspondence of the appeal and a brief summary, which are attachments 1 and 2. Then part of the procedures is if in attendance, which I believe Mr. Potter is in attendance today, the board president will invite him to speak concerning the appeal, and then the board shall decide whether to grant or deny the appeal. So the fiscal impacts of this appeal, if the board decides to deny the appeal, there is no fiscal impact. If the board decides to grant the appeal, the agency may credit Mr. Potter's account in the amount of $47.88, which is the amount of water consumption for that month. Staff's recommendation is based on the rereads and the field flow test that was performed by our field services supervisor. Staff is recommending that the board deny the appeal of Charles Potter.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question before we proceed. So after Mr. Potter has come to the podium and talk about the appeal, is there an opportunity for board members to not only question staff, but also question Mr. Potter or direct questions towards him?
Yes, that's part of the process.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes.
Mr. Potter, would you like to come up?
for the staff for the work that you did. They were also extremely courteous during the process of a unhappy customer. Sometimes it's not easy to talk people off ledges, and they did. So credit your staff for helping us understand this. It's a small amount of money, but it's a pretty big principle to me. We're snowbirds. My wife and I are, 69 years old. We have a 93-year-old father-in-law who lives with us. We take him back and forth to the Spokane area, and we've been doing this for quite a number of years. And we are completely away from the home during those summer months. And and so we use no water. We don't have a gardener that uses anything on our behalf or whatever. So when I got my bill and it said that I had used 15,700 gallons of water, I thought to myself, well, my house is either full, because that would be the amount of water needed to fill a 15 by 30-foot swimming pool. Or I would have a big green spot, or I'd have a leak, or whatever. I called leak detectors, had them come out. Your staff came out and did the flow business. And there was just no water used. Well, even the next month, 780 gallons were used, which would be, 100 flushes of a toilet. If we had one that was not compliant, it was 7 gallons per flush. And so something is actually wrong. And I guess when I think about, when I turn off my cable TV, when I leave for the summer, the cable TV company protects me from having somebody come in and buy pay-per-view movies. And so I don't know if someone has stolen the water from you and from me. If they stole it from you and I have to pay for it, that doesn't feel very fair. And the other thing is, I would question sort of the best practices. Do you all have a method that I should have known about or should have discovered, or that you should invent, that allows a snowbird to go away and have confidence that their water's not going to be used? To turn it off at the street, to lock it, perhaps, or put a lock on it, rent a lock, buy a lock from you, do something to protect me and you from having water stolen. It seems that there's nothing that is sacred anymore in terms of personal property and or government property, for that matter. And so I would just ask you, I've already paid the bill. The $46 is not going to make my family suffer. It's just wrong. And I just would ask you to consider its wrongness and advise me what to do, and possibly invent a procedure to help other people when they leave, to not have this happen again. And anyway, and I did the math. The water would have had to run, and it's a 1-inch line. Yesterday, your folks were out that do the enforcement for water waste, and I had the guy open up the thing and tell me, what size the line is and everything. And this would be about 19 hours worth of water running at full blast in the pipe size that we have. And again, there's no green spots, there's no puddles, there's no breaks. If it had been a break, or if it had been a leak that was a slab leak, the next month would have been similar, I would think, in terms of the amount of water that was leaking from whatever this source was, even if it wasn't evident, and that was not the case. And so simply, there's something wrong with the measuring mechanism, and they claim it's not, or someone has stolen it from me and from you. And I would just ask you to help me think about that. And I'm sorry to spend your time on $46 worth of water, but it's an important principle to me.
Thank you. We'll start with Director Gracia. Do you have questions for Mr. Potter and maybe staff?
I'm leery to ask questions, but one for staff, if you don't. Do we advise people in any way that they should shut their water off when they leave for an extended period of time, or do we just avoid that altogether? Or is that discussed in any way along the?
So we have several different instances with customers that are frequent snowbirds that come in and out of the valley. Of course, every situation is a bit different. We do not encourage that customers turn off their account entirely because then they would have to completely reestablish their
Just
account.
think of the valve out front.
Yeah, so we don't encourage to, because then we would go, DWA would go and actually turn it off. We do encourage customers to use their customer control valve if they do not have any landscaping or any other needs on the property while they are away. We do encourage that they use their customer control valve to turn that water off so that it is not used.
I have no idea where that
Yeah,
is.
can you explain what that means?
Yes, the customer control valve, it's located in two different positions on the property, depending on the age of the home. Typically, it is in a concrete box with a lid where the meter sits just behind the meter and you can turn that off. And it is a valve that is owned and operated by the customer themselves because DWA's systems end at the back of that meter. Or alternatively, in older style homes, it is located kind of up by the front door by a spigot. There is a shut-off valve there as well, just depending on the property itself.
Thank you. Anything else, Director Gracia?
No, I don't think so. I just want to insert that in the cases I'm familiar with, are you in a condominium association or is it a private residence?
It is an association, yes,
Yeah.
and I have a shared wall. I live in a duplex environment.
I lived in that situation twice, and as I recall, almost every newsletter included a thing that said, if you leave, turn off your water. I don't know. I guess because they become responsible for interior damage if toilets leak or something, or I'm not sure why that was the case. But in your situation, have you ever seen, I mean, is that something that even would occur to you?
No, I was an association president for about 7 years on the other side of Cathedral Canyon Country Club there for, like I said, 7 years, almost 8 years. And we never made that kind of communication with anybody. And of course, it was a different water district, but we were not encouraged to touch anybody's equipment. And I did know where my own shutoff valve was there. I had no idea where my shutoff valve was here. And yesterday, the gentleman that came from your enforcement thing that was just inadvertently in the neighborhood, had to use his tool to get the lid off and everything to do that. Not something I really want to do at 69 years old, to get down and do that. And so, frankly, I'd be happy to call somebody, and you guys might think about inventing a service that would allow me to do that, or to allow someone to do it, or to put a lock on it, or whatever. I had someone at my association. I brought it up to my association board that I'm not on now. I also challenged our, the obvious culprits are, well, what about your landscapers? Did your landscapers come and hook a hose on? Did somebody do something to wash down the hurricane, dust or whatever? We have cameras, and we have no evidence that they did. We'll add more cameras this year before we go, because it'll bother me a lot if this happens again. It's never happened to me. I've been in the Valley 10 years, and I've lived at 3 different locations. I've just never had anything happen like this before. And
Do you know if you have what kind of meter you have? Is it read by the,
staff knows.
I guess it wouldn't be mechanical meter, I guess is a question I have.
Yeah, it's our standard Badger meter, displacement meter.
And we had somebody go out and test it against the flow?
So as part of the investigation, our field service supervisor did go out and did a flow test, and it measured 100% accuracy
Right.
During that test.
And our district policy is that if it flows through the meter, it's yours?
That's
Right.
correct. If the water passes through the meters, it is then it's the customer's responsibility.
And there's the sticky situation that we're in, so.
Well, and again, the sticky situation is, like I said, the cable company can keep somebody from coming in and buying pay-per-view movies, but you guys can't help me keep somebody from stealing water from you and from me. And that seems a little problematic.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I just have one question. So you have no outdoor irrigation, not one sprinkler or dripper or anything. Okay, thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Oh, yeah, I sympathize with the customer, but I would make 2 points. One is that, we're not like the phone company that can just waive a bill when we want to. We are statutorily obliged to charge for water that's used by a customer. We can't give credits like that. Secondly, the water meter does not have an independent energy source. The dials are turned by the action of the water flowing through the meter. And when the meters break, typically they register no flow, so it's generally in the customer's favor when the meter breaks. It is, as far as I could tell, not possible for a meter to be the dials to be turning if the water hasn't gone through it. So the water went through the meter and it went somewhere. So you may be on track when you say somebody stole the water, but they stole it on your side of the meter. I would suggest if you have external hose bib, put a padlock on it. If you have any other way that somebody can get at water from your premises, you secure that so it can't happen. But I'm afraid I don't see any way we can grant this appeal. I'm sorry.
Vice President Bowman.
I too am sympathetic with the customer and the loss of the water somewhere, whether it was stolen or a leak. But by all indications, it does appear that maybe somebody tapped into your water and took some. But I guess we really don't know. I have no questions other than a comment to staff. Do we, when we send out our newsletters to their customers, do we ever reference, hey, if you're going away as a snowbird, here are some items you could do to secure the water on your side? Because once the water passes through that meter, it becomes yours.
I get it.
Yeah, but I like the idea of pointing out to customers that might not consider it, that somebody could steal your water. However, I could also think there could be liabilities on telling people to turn off their water. That all of a sudden it sits there empty through the summer, the heat does things to the pipes, now they turn it back on, and all of a sudden we have leaks. So,
Which is why we don't turn ours off. There's
There
never
you
been any
go.
reason to. And the people that, service our hot water tank said that's not a good idea either. And
exactly.
we have no leaks in the house. We have no toilets running. We don't have any of that. So, well, I guess it's just shame on me. My meter used the water.
Well, we haven't actually voted yet, so and I don't have any further questions. So I'll look for a motion from one of our directors.
I move to deny the appeal.
I'll look for a second.
Second.
I have a first from Secretary Treasurer McKenna and a second from Director Grasha. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
I'm sorry, but
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, sir. Right, so we can move to item 7, which is a discussion item, 7A, Legislative Annual Report. Mr. Reeb, thank you for coming today.
Well, my pleasure. It's good to be with you again. And so we submitted a written report. I'd just like to highlight some of the trends that we saw this year and look forward to 2024. This year we saw continued trend in the legislature of looking into ways to reduce or control urban water use throughout California. Probably the biggest package of legislation was water rights legislation, 3 bills that the agency, statewide associations, and hundreds of your sister agencies up and down the state were engaged on. Those bills were very controversial, would have resulted in significant changes to the California's system of water rights, both in terms of administration and enforcement. Very controversial. Of the 3 bills, 1 reached the governor after significant amendments that were sought by the Association of California Water Agencies and others. That bill, SB 389, did get signed into law. The significance of SB 389 is that it authorizes the State Water Resources Control Board to issue information orders to water diverters, water right holders, to ask an inquiry into the manner of diversion, how much water is being used, where it's being taken from, and for what purpose. And if the board finds there's concern about whether there's a right to take that water, they would hold hearings and make a determination on that. Existing law prior to SB 389 required a complaint by another water user to be filed before the state board could issue an information order. So it gives the board new authority to pursue these actions on its own. It really will not have any effect on this agency, as I can tell, because of the manner in which you operate your local water diversions. And of course, the State Water Project is fully reporting and watched, like a hawk on water use in California. So the other two bills remain active. They're eligible to be heard in the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee as late as early July next year. There have not been any meetings, any conversations or discussions about whether there's a middle path to take on these bills. So we'll just have to see what happens as we move into the new session. Lots of legislative activity in the area of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and groundwater adjudication. So for the agency, we were very closely monitoring the groundwater adjudication legislation. We really don't anticipate that happening down here, but we had a couple of concerns with the bill. At one point, it would have required the court to appoint one local entity to forward all of the case documents to the Department of Water Resources for posting on their website. And we were concerned that since your agency is a GSA, that it may be a logical entity for the court to appoint. We didn't want those costs to fall solely on the agency, so we secured an amendment to the bill to direct the court to apportion the costs for compliance to all of the parties in that adjudication. It also would have required the local GSA or local agency to arrange for the Department of Water Resources or the State Water Resources Control Board to come to a public meeting and make a presentation on adjudication. And we were also concerned with that because this agency can't compel a state agency to appear and do anything. So we changed that. We got a change to that bill to say invite rather than arrange. So anyway, that was AB 779, and that got signed into law by the governor. But all the other groundwater adjudication bills were either held on the fiscal suspense file or did not get pursued out of policy committee. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is another big item in the water arena. The environmental justice community, social justice community, mostly out of the San Joaquin Valley, are concerned with the pace of improvement with respect to sustainably managing groundwater basins. There are, as you're aware, there are basins in the state that are subject to critical overdraft. Yours is not one of those. But under SGMA, once a plan is adopted, a groundwater sustainability plan, the agency has 20 years to achieve that sustainable operation of the basin. We still have basins that are in decline. A lot of times it's because of the lack of surface water, because of the drought or other regulatory impacts, or just too much farming going on in a concentrated area. But the legislature and legislators are getting impatient. They weren't there when the law was very heavily negotiated and very tightly written. And so they want things to happen right now. And we've had to explain to them there's 20 years to achieve that sustainability goal, and some areas are going to take longer than others. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well to make sure that the good practices that you're undertaking here under your alternate plan are working, and we certainly don't want you to get caught up in other efforts to tighten or change the requirements of SGMA after you've spent 20, 30 years with your what's now your alternate plan to locally manage your groundwater basin. State fiscal outlook is not good. Last year, or this current fiscal year, the state was dealing with a $31.5 billion deficit. And recently, the Governor's Department of Finance has indicated next year will be upwards of a $25 billion deficit. So that follows this $31.5 billion. The Department of Finance is projecting general fund budget deficits through fiscal year 25-26. They're not pointing to a recession or, inflation or anything in particular. It's just the personal income taxes that the state relies on for well over half of its revenues are not meeting the projections. Some of it is stock market, some of it is capital gains, some of it is supply chain issues that's affecting the corporations and things like that. So what does that mean? It means that the state has to prioritize where it's spending money, and right now their priorities are in the area of renewable energy, clean energy, wildfire prevention, social service programs, and education. We see that very clearly when in the May revision, the governor reduced a lot of prior funding when the state had a lot of money. That was committed for water infrastructure, water recycling, and things of that nature that we outlined in the report. Those were cut from the budget. And the governor indicated that he wanted to work with the legislature to place a climate resilience bond, a state general obligation bond, on the ballot next year. There are 3 bonds that fit that category that we discuss in the report. What we hear now is that state voters in recent polling they don't seem to have an appetite for approving new debt for the state. And that's consistent with prior election cycles where the economy or world events had a dampening effect on voter sentiment. And when voters are unsure about their own situation or about the status of the world or the economy, they tend to not want to vote for state debt. So we don't know what's going to happen with the climate resilience bond. There have been no discussions about that. Senator Allen and Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia, the 2 primary authors in the Senate and the Assembly, had indicated this summer that they were going to hold listening sessions throughout the state to hear what local folks felt priorities were in terms of water infrastructure. Those have not taken place. I met with the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee consultant in the Assembly last week to ask him what he was hearing on them. There's just really been no discussion. So the legislature has until June of next year to pass a state general obligation bond for placement on the November ballot. We know that the governor's Department of Finance says the state can afford to issue or approve $28 billion worth of new debt. They gauge that on, they want to keep the state general fund debt service payments to no more than 5% of the total general fund. Right now, they're about 2.7%, so they've calculated the state could issue another $28 billion in new bonds and still remain below that 5% ceiling. There's a mental health bond in March. That'll be the only bond on the ballot. It's about $5 billion. So there may be another 22 that's there, $22 billion that's available for the legislature should it decide to do so. Assemblymember Garcia's bond is $16 billion right now, and the governor's Department of Finance has told the legislature they see an appetite for a climate resilience bond in the $8 to $10 billion range. So we know that $16 billion is already too low for a lot of water districts, water recycling districts, and others. Don't know how that will shake out, but again, that'll be before the legislature next spring. Finally, I did want to say there's leadership changes in both the Assembly and the Senate. The Assembly has a new speaker, Robert Rivas, Democrat from the Salinas, Monterey area. He is the first non-Southern California speaker in over 20 years. The speakers for the last 22 years have been from Los Angeles or San Diego. So there'll be a bit of a break from that direction, policy or political direction in that area. He has not made changes yet for chairs, but we anticipate as the new session begins on January 3rd that we could see new policy committee chairs, including Water Parks and Wildlife. There's already been a change to the local government committee, which is important to the agency here. The current chair was elevated to Speaker Pro Tem, Assemblymember Aguiar Curry. So now we have Juan Carrillo, Democrat from Palmdale, is chairing the local government committee. But we'll see other committee changes, and that, of course, could have impacts on the legislative priorities for next year. In the Senate, Senator Atkins is termed out, San Diego Democrat. And so she has turned over, or will turn over, there's no date yet, the Speaker's Pro Tem's chair, or the President's chair, to Senator Mike McGuire. He's a Democrat from the North Coast, former county supervisor, has a strong environmental record, cares a lot about wildfire preparation, wildfire resilience because of his district, and a pretty quiet senator, but he's been involved in a lot of the big environmental climate resilience, energy discussions over the last several years. So he'll be termed out in the year 2026. So some are just viewing him as an interim, placeholder for a little over 2 years. Given the turnover that will occur of term limits, there's probably a bigger class that from which a longer term Senate president would come. So I'll stop there, and I'll be pleased to answer any questions about what's in the report or what's not in the report.
Thank you, sir. Director Grasha, do you have some questions?
I don't have any questions except to say in reading the agenda packet, I always feel like how do you keep track? It's not possible. Keep track of all that. So I congratulate you on being able to do that, and thank you, and thank you for the great report.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I don't have any questions, just thank you for the report.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I wonder if you wouldn't mind grazing in your crystal ball and seeing, do you think the Delta Conveyance Project will ever get built?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll tell you a joke later that kind of goes along with that. But the State Water Project, I think, is, and you've probably heard from General Manager Kraus, that it's facing a lot of challenges. So you've got the Sites Reservoir Project up north, which would be an injection of new water supply and operational flexibility. The good news with that project is that yesterday the governor invoked the SB 149 CEQA Judicial Expeditious Treatment Law. That was part of his infrastructure package that he signed this July. That will direct the court, if feasible, to expedite CEQA challenges of that project and do so within 270 days, so less than a year, rather than it could be 3 or 4 years for some of these complex CEQA cases. The Delta Conveyance Project is still, it's an expensive project. The Department of Water Resources is moving now to permitting. They've been doing, from what I hear, good work on design and environmental review. It's probably, I think at this point would not be completed until maybe as late as 2040. A lot of it will depend on the state water contractors like the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California and Kern County Water Agency, who would have to really step up to commit to continued funding. And I think that's some of the internal discussions between the state contractors and the Department of Water Resources. It may take Governor Newsom really getting behind it and pushing it in order to get those agencies, those significant agencies, to stay in line and keep pursuing it. So the short answer to your question is I don't know. It's moving forward, but it seems to be at what I would call a glacial pace. Not the climate change glacial pace, but the old style glacial pace. And then we've got subsidence challenges in the southern part of the California aqueduct between San Luis Reservoir and the Tehachapi's that are constraining the ability for the project to move 100% of project entitlement south. That's a real concern. So if you add up all three of those, you're looking at, $30 billion in expenditures just to keep the same amount of water that you were able to get maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So it's going to come down to cost benefit, and right now it looks like sites is probably moving quicker than the conveyance project or the subsidence repairs.
Thanks.
Vice President Bowman.
No questions, but I want to thank you for your expertise and bringing all this data to us.
Thank you, and I'll echo that. And thank you for being here this morning, and great report. So we can move to item 7B, another discussion item, agency strategic planning update. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Ortega. I wanted to bring this to the board and provide just an update on the strategic plan. And I provided just some key dates here in the report. So our current staff is working on an RFP document. That document will be ready to be sent out to our consultants on November 17th of this month. And as part of the RFP dates, they'll have until December 29th to review and submit their proposal to the agencies. We gave them a little longer time because of the holidays with Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday. We'll then review these proposals and present our recommended selection to the executive committee on January 11th. And then at that point, we'll begin our contract negotiations with that consultant, and then provide our contract negotiation results with the committee on February 1st, and then provide a board presentation at the February 6th board meeting. And then at that point, we will be on the road here for our strategic plan. Part of that plan will include a workshop with the board. Those dates and so forth we don't have. We'll have those once we have a contract with a consultant that we choose. And that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have questions?
Comment, I guess. When I proposed this a few months ago, and I'm grateful you're looking into these things, my idea of this was to bring on a consultant at some point in the future so that we could work with the, including Mission Springs Water District and perhaps some of the issues that the tribe has raised in a way that would allow the three boards, if you will, to better understand some of the issues that are involved in taking the three agencies forward. But I didn't expect us to be moving this fast. I thought the litigation in one case would at least be settled, and perhaps as we work through our issues with the tribe, that some of those kind of issues could be addressed by this entire board and the Mission Springs board. But while this litigation's hanging over our head, it seems to me that I think it would be wise to put this, to table this for, at least for now. I mean, we have the case with the Mission Springs will be settling, the court will make a determination at some point in the near future as to whether that, gets taken care of and whose favor. And then you guys are still working with the tribe and, working together to try to develop a strategy to move forward. So maybe we should wait a little while on this. It's the way I see it. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
I don't have any, I guess my only comment would be, I mean, I think it's important for the agency to move forward with our own strategic plan independent of, I mean, I know it can't be completely independent, but I think it's important to get this part moving, and then we can always incorporate the other agencies at a time that it's feasible.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Yeah, I agree. I think we should move forward. There are unknowns, and those are some big unknowns for sure. But every plan is subject to some guessing of what the future might hold, and we could always iterate around a second time if we get one of these issues or both of these issues settled, and we know which way we're going. So I would be inclined to move it forward. We need at least some vision of where we go next, given the challenges we know we do have. So I'm in favor of moving it along.
Vice President Baumann?
I appreciate the staff's diligence in getting this going and moving it forward. It will be a living document. It's not something that will be codified and that we can't add or subtract things to, especially in regards to the lawsuits. So,
Thank you. And I'll just echo the comments that have been made. I had asked for this for a while ago. I think it's important for us as an agency, as Director Bloomer had stated, to get our own plan together, and then we can consider how that might be impacted at a later time with regard to the settlement of, or the outcomes of these two suits that were previously mentioned. So we can move to the next item, which is 7C, September water use reduction figures. And it says Ms. Weinrich, but I don't see her available.
Yes. She is apparently having some car issues.
Okay.
So Ms. Metzger will step in for her, and,
Okay.
so
Thank you.
I'll pass it over.
Thank you, Ms.
to Ashley.
Metzger.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson and President Ortega and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be before you with this updated water use reduction figure report. Gone through some efforts to enhance the report that you used to see on the consent calendar on a monthly basis. So I'll walk you through the report page by page. This first page you'll see has been modified in that it only shows the most recent year's data, and it's compared now to 2020, not to 2013. One of the reasons we've updated the report is 2013 is now 10 years ago, and while it was the baseline that the state used during the 2014-26, so we're using 2020 because that was the same baseline that the state used during the more recent drought from 2020 to 2022. That said, the more recent baseline is not a perfect baseline. Obviously, some really interesting things happened in 2020, which is evidenced by what you see as an increase in water use, which appears as a negative 2% in April. So in 2023, that means we used more water than we used in April of 2020. And one could pretty fairly assume that that has to do with the fact that in April of 2020, our tourism-based economy was in a state of shutdown. So again, the positive bars on the graph on this first page are all good news. It means that even compared to a more conservative period of 2020, just 2 years ago, we're still saving considerably. And we are looking at customer billing data. So this is water that was used by customers. And we're looking at figures per meter. A little bit later in the report, we do show you the total figures as well. But we feel that the per meter numbers are really important because they help account for growth. So they're really helpful when you're comparing one year against another year and trying to account for the fact that there have been new businesses and new homes to serve. I wanted to share that the Desert Water Agency is doing a great job meeting goals, and both mandatory and voluntary calls for conservation water use objectives that we anticipate to be finalized by the end of this coming calendar year, so by the end of 2024. And much like your strategic plan, this report will be a report to stay static over time. We will be making changes to improve the report objective so that we can compare what the state's requiring of us compared to how we're actually performing. So if you go to the next page, you'll see a new element. It is a trend graph for the past 10 years. So it does take us back to that 2013, that old baseline we were using. And you'll see a lot of peaks and valleys. Those are our seasonal water use trends. So those peaks are all generally July or August. And then in many of the months, you see kind of like I call it a tail. It's a second small peak. And those generally show overseeding. So you can see over time how trends have changed, and the colored bars on this graph denote the different water shortage contingency plan stages. So this will show you when Desert Water Agency was restricting water use to its customers in different ways. That darker red color that you see from 2015 to 2017 shows the 3-day-a-week watering restriction. So that's the most strict we've been. And then you'll see the lighter colors that denote when certain times of day watering was restricted. You also see 2 dotted lines. Those are really important. Those are our gross, which is purple, the line on top, and per meter, which is black, the line on bottom. Water use has gone down. Water use per meter has actually gone down faster than overall water use, which makes sense because more people are coming into the picture, and that growth is still showing conservation, and at even a faster rate if you take into account all of those new customers in the denominator of water use. So when you're taking all of that water use and dividing it by how many people we're serving. And then the third page of the report is largely the same. You will see that the statistics for the month of September are there. We include water use per meter, total water use, and then the water waste reporting statistic, a figure that we've essentially compromised with DWR on, that's included in the urban water management plan. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you have about this newly updated report, and we look forward to bringing you new iterations in the.
Thank you. Just so you know, we're having a lot of audio challenges with you. You seem to be cutting out a lot. Maybe it has something to do with the speed of, or the internet speed or whatever. But we'll proceed. And Director Grasha, if you have some questions for Mrs. Metzger about the report.
I don't have any questions, but I see Ms. Weintraub.
She's
Maybe
entered
she'd
the room.
like to
Yes.
chime in and fill in the blanks that from the bad connection. if you're ready and able.
I'm ready. I got 2 flat tires in both my runs after.
Oh, no.
And my car I bought on Wednesday. So I'm like, so I apologize for my delay in being
No
here.
problem. Thank you for
If you
coming.
have any questions, we kind of go through, my staff puts the reports together. And really the objective of these changes is to give you data that kind of explains the right story. And so that you can better utilize this information to make decisions. So that's the crux of it. I know that you'll see, if you have any questions on anything, I'd be happy to talk about the background, why we went this way, any feedback you have. But what we're really trying to do is give you a more accurate report because it's going to be changing over time. We have new regulations, and so we're trying to evolve so that as we go along, we will meet those requirements, and you'll be able to see the numbers and everything within the new requirements.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
I do not have any questions, but I really like the new report, and the figures that you're using seem to make more sense and tell a truer story of what's happening.
Great.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Thanks for the report. I like the new format. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
Ditto, ditto, ditto. All
Right.
good.
Thank you. And I have nothing further to add. Thank you for coming.
Sorry for the
I'm sorry
delay.
it was so
Yes.
stressful this morning for you. And we'll look forward to, I think, several of the directors are coming on the tour tomorrow. Is that correct?
Sure, you'll be there. And exciting new sites. We'll be doing Snow Creek, the Snow Creek filtration facility. Then we'll also head to Whitewater Hydro Plant, and then we will go to the Mission Creeks. And we've kind of we've created some booklets and things that people can take home, and it's a detailed on each site. And we have posters there so people can see the chain of what happens and where water goes and the different options. So we're hoping these extras will just help customers better understand the system. We've got engineers that are going to be on site to answer those wonky questions as well. So, and we have some fun history that we'll cover on the bus.
All right. Thank you very much.
President?
Yes.
Is it possible we can get copies of the booklets?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure everybody gets couplets.
Thank you.
It's supposed to come today, so once we get those together, I'll coordinate with
As long as they
Sylvia.
have flat tires.
They're really nice. Everyone contributed, and it was a team effort. So it was
Wonderful.
great working with everyone, all the different departments on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we can move to item 8, which is the Secretary Treasurer's report from September of 2023. Secretary Treasurer McKenna, thank you.
September 2023, the highlights are we received $4.3 million in water sales revenue, $77,000 in recycled water sales revenue, and a $100,000 contribution from Sentinel Energy for the landscape contribution program. Landscape conservation program. We paid out $2 million in accounts payable. Our year-to-date water sales are 6% under budget. Revenue is 5% under budget, and expenses are 10% under budget. There's an increase of 5 actionable potable water services to 23,509. The general fund received $49,000 in replenishment assessments from private pumpers and $38,000 in power sales revenue from Southern California Edison for the Whitewater Hydro. The general fund paid out $2.2 million in state water project charges for a year-to-date total of $6.8 million. We received $71,000 in wastewater revenue receipts and spent $82,000 in accounts payable on the wastewater fund. Those are the highlights.
Thank you. Any questions for our Secretary Treasurer? Director Gracia? No?
Well, I kind of have a question for Ms. Sines, I guess. Do you mind if I look at this?
No, have that too.
Maybe she could roll it back on the screen. Well, under budget, over budget numbers, they seem to all be going in the wrong direction, or?
That's a good number.
Yes. So
Should I not be panicked, or is it?
I would not panic.
Okay, good.
So for our water sales, we of course budget based off of historical experience, but whenever we have droughts or conservation requirements, we try to estimate that as best as possible. But considering that, and at times we have, knowing that we are still looking to conserve more than where we have been, we build in different factors based off of what we're targeting. But however, given that we do have that new rate stabilization, our revenue stabilization rate, we have our safety net if we meet 10% under our revenue budget. However, we are only 5% under budget at this point in time. And we're just a few months into the fiscal year as well. So that's also important to note that a lot of times these things even out over time, where we have consumption that just it levels itself out based off what we're thinking about. And when it comes to the expenses, we are 10% under. So we have no concern at this point that we are not going to have the funds necessary to cover all of our expenses. But time will tell where these expenses actually hit and the revenues actually come in. And if it becomes a concern, we will definitely be bringing it to the board and to address. But at this point in time, there is no reason for concern.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer?
No questions, thanks.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna, do you have anything else to add? No?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. And Vice President Bowman?
Yes, on what we have in front of us, the $100,000 contribution from Sentinel. Who is Sentinel?
Sentinel is the power plant. So that is, the original agreements were with CPV, and now the name is Sentinel.
Right.
And we have agreements with them for conservation so that they can meet I believe it's their environmental impact requirements, mitigation requirements.
Do we know if our sister agency, such as MSWD, has opportunity for that money as well?
I am not aware.
They do not. No.
Uh,
The water comes from the groundwater, so it comes from us essentially.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have no additional questions. Thank you. We can move to the general manager's report. Mr. Johnson.
All right. Thank you, President Ortega. So the first item here is great news. DWR approved the San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan, that's great news. As Mr. Reeb had mentioned, GSAs are required to develop and implement a GSP to avoid undesirable results and mitigate overdraft within 20 years. And DWA is a GSA in the San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin, along with San Gorgonio Pass and Virginia. And you are required to update the plan every 5 years or whenever there's an amendment. And DWR will evaluate and approve the GSPs and issue an assessment at least every 5 years. And for the GSP for San Gorgonio Pass, that will be January of 2027 for that first 5-year update. I should mention that DWA is a GSA in the Indio Subbasin and the Mission Creek Subbasin, and those plans have submitted a 5-year plan. However, DWR has not yet completed its review, and they have until January of 2024 to complete those reviews. And of course, DWR is not required to approve the 5-year updates, but will likely provide feedback to inform the next 5-year updates. And the next item is DWA attended the Desert Age Project, or DAP, Health Equality Walk. You see a lot of people enjoying our water, the pets, and It was hosted, the event occurred on October 28th, and we hosted a booth. It was at Ruth Hardy Park. And the event included a 5K walk that started at 9, and we engaged with all the attendees, their dogs, and we promoted our conservation and to educate them on where Palm Springs water comes from, and we provided canned water for the attendees. So vaccination clinic, we will be hosting a free vaccination clinic on Thursday, November 16th from 12 to 4. It's sponsored by Riverside County. It'll be open to DWA staff and members of the public. There's no appointments. Appointments are not necessary. Walk-ins are welcome. And it will be for COVID-19 and the mpox, and I believe the flu, correct, Chris? Or
They're planning on bringing in flu vaccines. It just is subject to availability, but they were pretty sure
Okay.
they would have enough.
all right. And then for Veterans Day, the office will be closed on Friday, November 10th, to observe Veterans Day, which is on the 11th. Here is our system leak data. And see 24 leaks over the 2-week period, which is a typical, you can see a lot of colored streets. Those are replacement pipeline streets. So we'll hopefully be dropping those within the next year. I should say that Avenida Caballeros, which that job was awarded, we believe it is almost ready to get started. Correct, Mr. Tate? That's within early January. We will be starting our Avenida Caballeros project, which we're excited to get that going. And then here is a list of our meetings and activities, GM meetings and activities. A lot of items. Mr. Kraus went to Sacramento for some DCP meetings. We also met with the tribe in the state of California on the 18th regarding mediations. There was a TAC meeting on the 19th. And let's see, anything of, I should say that the, okay, sorry. And just that we are, as I said, a lot of activities going on here. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Grasha, do you have any questions for Mr. Johnson?
No questions, no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Bloomer?
No questions, no comments.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
None for me. Thank you.
All right. Vice President Bowman?
None?
Okay. And I don't have anything additional. So we can move to item 10, which is Director's Reports on Meetings and Events attended on behalf of the agency. I'll start with Director Grasha, and if you could list what events you attended outside of our regular meetings and the date and name of the event, that would be great. Thank you.
So I guess here we go. Starting at the 17th of October, which was our last DWA meeting, Desert Valley Builders Association had an event at Hot Purple Energy, which I found to be helpful. Directors from Mission Springs were there, and we had a lively conversation about things at Mission Springs. I attended on October 20th the Sites Joint Authority Board meeting and Reservoir Committee meeting, which of course is not compensatable, but helpful in my view nonetheless. On October 3rd, I did the IT training and testing for the agency. On October 24th, the Coachella Valley Water District board meeting. And another one, not compensable as well, but one of the aqua events that we approved since was AI-driven communications, which was a webinar, I guess. And that was, presenters were Pam Tobin, Adam Prablowski, which we know from work for, and Lorraine Garcia from CVWD. Interesting hour. And then on October 25th, again, non-compensable, but still relevant, I think, CVWD had a community meeting for their hazard mitigation, which basically reviewing the all of the things that they have to do to be certain that they're able to collect when a disaster occurs through FEMA funding. I don't know if we've participated in a project like that, but I think it's something that we should look at and see if, it sounded like if you didn't have a hazard mitigation plan that you weren't eligible. I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if we have one. But during that discussion, they talked about disaster preparedness plans that they had, I guess, made public. I went to look for ours and couldn't find one. So sometime in the future, I would like to have the board updated. You know, you guys here in Palm Springs weren't really affected. I was without water for 8 days on a boil water notice. The flooding basically took out the place where I live. They're still digging out. And it raised the issue in my mind, you know, what's expected in terms of communication between our board members and staff and in light of a disaster. I know, and you know, they don't, it doesn't get much coverage, but there were definite breakdowns across the freeway during that event. People weren't able to get into work. They went days before their staff could get basically to help take care of things. And there was zero communication. We received a boil water notice 3 days after the incident. And it went on for until, I think it was 8 days. So we teach in disaster preparedness to be prepared for 3 with water, drinking water for 3 days. And I learned real quick that that's not enough. So if you're planning on 3 days of water, plan on more, and more than a gallon per person per day. And then, if I'm not mistaken, oh yeah, the October 31st, we had our conservation and public affairs meeting here. And then on November 2nd, Director McKenna, I don't know if there were others were there, was the Agua Caliente Cultural Plaza, non-compensable. But we attended that, and, it was nice to see they were finally able to get that started, and everybody seemed to be thrilled that the agony of construction was finally over. But it's a beautiful building. I hope that they're successful in the work that they have planned for that place. And I'm looking forward to visiting it again without the crowds of people, so that you could actually take some time and ponder all of the experiences that the tribe has had going back for millennia, as they like to say, and true. And then that brings us to today. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I attended, it was on the same day as our board meeting. October 17th was the State of the City for City of Palm Springs at the Palm Springs Art Museum for a city update of what's happening. I also went to the DVBA mixer at Hot Purple Energy on October 19th. And then it was non-compensable, but on Wednesday, October 25th, I was at the Palm Springs Realtors Association meeting with Clark, and we did a presentation from the conservation staff, and we did a presentation to the realtors. It was good, and they had a lot of really good questions about our different rebate programs and turf buyback and everything. So Clark did all the heavy lifting, and I was just there to answer a couple questions, but it went really well. So, and that is it.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
Since our last meeting on the 17th, I went to the Palm Springs State of the City address, and I found that very useful. You forgot that one. On the 19th, I went to the Palm Springs Unified School District Legislative Breakfast. And I must admit, I was very impressed by the presentation, which was mostly done by high school students from the various high schools. I saw a lot of future political leaders in that young group. These are people that I'm glad to see. On the 24th, I was at a committee meeting here for technology. On the 26th of October, I stopped in at Mission Springs Water District's Water 101 series. They do presentations for the public on topics regarding water. And I don't think I learned a lot, but I learned a little bit about it. It was on water reclamation, and I learned that there's no such thing as a flushable wipe. Remember that. They say, do you have considerable problems with so-called flushable wipes showing up at their treatment plant? On the 28th, I went to the DAP Health Equity Walk, which is known as the AIDS Walk, and we had a booth there. I stopped by. I listened to Ms. Weinrich ask a member of the public, "Where do you get your water from?" And he replied, I quote, "I don't know. I turn the faucet on, it comes out." So I think since we have a constituency and a client base of people who don't know where their water comes from, they probably don't care where the water comes from. It's our responsibility to do the knowing and the caring for them until such time as they start to care. But that was a great event, and I was great and glad to see our organization was there. I went on the 30th of October to an event in Desert Hot Springs, the LGBTQ plus town hall. And an interesting meeting attended by the mayor, the chief of police, and some councilmen up there regarding issues that occur in Desert Hot Springs. And they are organizing their own gay pride in future months. So I'm going to try and help them with that. Where am I? Yes, also on November 2nd, I was at the opening of the Tribal Museum. Very, very interesting. I think it's a great asset to the valley to have that right in the center of town. It's going to cost $10 to visit, $8 for residents. I think everyone should go and see that. We got in for nothing, but so I was particularly struck by the remarks of Tribal Chairman Milosevic. I sort of think I'd lived here a long time because I've been here 17 years. But when you hear him talk about how the tribe has been here for thousands of years, and it's true, it does give you pause for reflection of how we treat our fellow residents of the valley. So it was meaningful and moving for me. After that, what to today? That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman?
Yes, I attended our technology transformation committee. Director Steins did a great job giving more detail on the up-and-coming changes and oversight of our technology. On the 25th, I attended the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce gathering at Cabot's. Was delightfully attended by people from all over the valley, including our our general manager's wife. Got to chat with her a bit. And on the 27th, we had our tribal gathering with CVWD. We spent a lot of time chatting about what is next and what can we do, and hoping that the tribe was able to figure out with Perez, get some help on some of their goals. And so we're looking forward to hopefully meeting tomorrow. So I haven't heard that we're not. And then we had our legislative committee meet last night. I'm impressed with Mr. Reeves' knowledge of the water in this state and what he brings to us as a district. And that's my report.
Thank you. So finally, I attended on Friday the 20th of October, the Region 9 Aqua Board meeting, the last one for the year. The highlights really had to do with committee assignments starting in January. So as some of you may know who have been to Aqua a few times, there are regional meetings, and those are attended by representatives from the region who might work for various water agencies, and those they'll offer a report. One of the members of those committees will offer a report to the audience of Region 9 attendees about various topics having to do with legislation or a legislative committee, finance committee, all kinds of different kinds of committees. So those assignments are pending. They were created by the incoming president and vice president of Region 9, and then forwarded to the Aqua incoming president for her final review and implementation. And then the following day, on Saturday the 21st, I attended the Garden Day that stopped in at the booth of the Coachella Valley Water Counts, which we are a member of, and then with Mr. Elliott's support, presented to an audience in the main theater at UCR Palm Desert on water sustainability, and it really was mostly about what this agency and what Coachella Valley Water District does to support the health of the aquifer, the sustainability of the aquifer, and also to talk about the impacts of drought on that. And then that was last night, Monday the 6th, attended a meeting with Mr. Reeb as part of the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. And that concludes my report. So unless there are any other questions at this point, I think we can move to Director's Comments, which is item number 11. And I'll start with Director Gracia.
Thank you. I have no comments and no questions.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No comments or questions.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have nothing further.
Okay. And Vice President Bowman.
I want to thank staff for putting Director McKenna's report on the screen so we can follow along with that. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And I have nothing further. So at this point, I see it's about 9:25. If we are going to move into closed session, if we could meet in the conference room at 9:35. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, staff, for your support today. Great. So welcome back to open session. And we apparently do have some action to, well, we're actually going to, I'm going to be looking for a motion from one of the directors with regard to item 12B from closed session. You may.
If I may suggest a motion,
Yes.
based on the discussion in closed session, this would be a motion to opt out of the settlement class in the litigation identified as item 12B, and authorize the general manager to sign and file the necessary documents to opt out of the settlement class in that litigation.
Great.
And I'll move that we adopt that motion.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Director Grasha and a second from Director Bloomer. And I'll look for a roll call vote, please.
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Aye.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And with that, we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.